Hi, I'm Dr. Helena Mitchell. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Boston Children's Hospital, and I've dedicated my entire career to saving children's lives. But 8 years ago, when my own 3-year-old daughter was dying from a congenital heart defect, the people who were supposed to love her most, my own parents, refused to save her life because they had already promised that money to my brother's wedding. What I'm about to tell you happened on October 15th, 2016. It was a Tuesday, and I remember every single detail because it was the day my world collapsed. Emily, my beautiful little girl with curly blonde hair and the brightest smile you've ever seen, had been in the pediatric ICU for 2 weeks. She was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Basically, the left side of her heart never fully developed. The doctor said she needed immediate surgery, a complex procedure that would give her a chance at a normal life. I was sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching my baby girl struggle to breathe with tubes coming out of her tiny body, when Dr. Rodriguez pulled me aside. "Helena," he said, "we've got a problem. Your insurance approved most of the surgery, but there's still a $95,000 gap. Without that money, we can't proceed." $95,000. That was all that stood between my daughter living or dying. I called my parents immediately. My father, Robert Mitchell, had built a successful construction company from nothing. My mother, Patricia, came from old money, the kind of family that never worried about bills. Together, they were worth over $2 million. $95,000 was pocket change to them. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as Emily's heart monitor beeped weakly in the background. "I need your help. Emily needs surgery, and insurance won't cover everything. I need $95,000, and I need it now." There was silence on the other end. Then, my father cleared his throat. "Helena, sweetheart, you know we'd love to help, but we've already committed that money to Marcus's wedding. The deposits are non-refundable." Marcus, my golden child brother who'd never worked a day in his life, but somehow always got everything handed to him on a silver platter. "Dad, this is Emily's life we're talking about," I pleaded. "She could die without this surgery." "Now, Helena," my mother's voice cut in. She'd picked up the other phone. "You're being dramatic. You're a doctor. Surely you can figure something out. Besides, Marcus has been planning this wedding for 2 years. We can't just cancel everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, your granddaughter is dying. The wedding can wait." "The wedding cannot wait," my father interrupted firmly. "We've already sent out 300 invitations. The venue is booked. The catering is arranged. This is Marcus's special day, and we won't let anyone ruin it." "Anyone?" He said, "anyone," as if my dying daughter was just some inconvenience. "Please," I whispered, my voice breaking as I watched Emily's little chest rise and fall with each labored breath. "I'm begging you. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll work extra shifts. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please help me save my daughter." My mother sighed like I was asking her to move mountains. "Helena, you need to be realistic. Even if Emily survives this surgery, she'll have medical problems her whole life. She'll be a burden." "Don't you dare call my daughter a burden!" I screamed, causing several nurses to look in my direction. "Lower your voice," my father snapped. "We're trying to have a reasonable conversation here. The fact is, we've already allocated our funds. The wedding is in 6 weeks and everything is paid for." "Then unpay for it," I shouted. "Cancel the flowers. Downgrade the venue. Do something." "Absolutely not," my mother said coldly. "This is Marcus's wedding. He's marrying Rebecca, the senator's daughter. This wedding is important for our family's reputation. Emily's surgery is just unfortunate timing." Unfortunate timing. That's what they called my daughter's fight for life. Have you ever been abandoned by your family when you needed them most? When you were at your absolute lowest point, and the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally just walked away? Please leave a comment and tell me your story, because what happened next changed everything. I hung up that phone and looked at my baby girl, hooked up to machines, fighting for every breath. That's when I made a promise to myself and to Emily. If my family could choose money over her life, then I would show them exactly what that choice would cost them. But first, let me tell you about the wedding they chose over my daughter's life. Marcus's wedding to Rebecca Hartwell wasn't just a wedding, it was a spectacle. $250,000 spent on what my parents called the social event of the decade. While Emily lay dying in her hospital bed, my family was planning the most extravagant celebration you could imagine. The venue, the historic Thornfield estate, $20,000 just for the day. But that wasn't enough for Marcus. No, he needed the presidential suite for the weekend. $15,000 a night for 3 nights. $45,000 just for him and Rebecca to get ready. Then there were the flowers. Not local flowers, mind you. Marcus insisted on having rare orchids flown in from Ecuador. $45,000 worth of flowers that would be dead in a week. The same amount of money that could have saved Emily's life, spent on decorations. The band? A full symphony orchestra, $35,000 for 4 hours of music. The cake? A 7-tier masterpiece from the most exclusive bakery in Boston, $12,000. The photographer? $20,000 for someone who'd shot celebrities. And Rebecca's dress. Oh, that dress. A custom Vera Wang creation that cost $25,000. $25,000 for a dress she'd wear for 1 day, while my daughter didn't have the money to see another day. But here's the part that really destroyed me. 3 days after I begged them to help save Emily, I received a text message in our family group chat. It was from my mother, sharing photos of wedding preparations. "Look at these gorgeous centerpieces. Rebecca has such exquisite taste. Can't wait to celebrate our beautiful boy Marcus." I stared at that message while sitting next to Emily's bed, listening to her labored breathing, and I replied, "While you're celebrating, Emily is getting worse. She might not make it through the week without surgery." My mother's response came within minutes. "Helena, please don't bring negativity to Marcus's special time. This is supposed to be joyful." Negativity. She called my daughter's medical crisis negativity. Then Marcus himself chimed in. "Helena, I know you're stressed, but maybe you should focus on being a better mom instead of asking everyone else to solve your problems. Real parents find a way to take care of their kids without begging." That message hit me like a physical blow. Here was my brother, who'd never held a job longer than 6 months, who still lived in my parents' pool house at 32, telling me I wasn't a good enough mother because I couldn't afford a $95,000 surgery on a pediatric resident's salary. But the worst part? Nobody defended me. Not one person in that family group chat stood up for Emily or for me. Instead, my Aunt Jennifer, who'd borrowed $50,000 from my parents for her own daughter's college tuition just 2 years earlier, sent a message that read, "Helena, maybe this is God's way of telling you that you're not ready to be a parent." That's when I knew I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. 2 days later, I found out they'd removed me from the family group chat entirely. My own mother told me later that I was bringing down the wedding energy and that they needed to focus on positive vibes only. While they were focusing on positive vibes, Emily coded twice. I spent 72 hours straight by her bedside, watching her fight for her life while my family celebrated their wedding preparations 50 miles away. Dr. Rodriguez kept asking me about the payment. "Helena, we need to know if you can secure the funds. If not, we need to discuss other options." Other options, palliative care, making Emily comfortable while we waited for her to die. I called my parents one more time on October 25th. I remember the exact date because it was the day Emily smiled at me for the first time in 2 weeks. Just a tiny little smile, but it gave me hope. "Dad, please," I said when he answered. "Emily smiled today. She's fighting so hard. The doctors say if we do the surgery now, she has an 80% chance of survival." 80%, Dad. Those are good odds." "Helena," he sighed. "We've been over this. The money is committed to the wedding. Marcus already put down deposits." "Then ask Marcus to help," I interrupted. "Ask him to postpone the wedding for 6 months. Ask him to have a smaller wedding. Ask him to what?" It was Marcus's voice. He'd taken the phone. "Ask me to ruin my wedding because you can't afford your kids' medical bills? Helena, you're 35 years old. You're a doctor. Figure it out." "Marcus, she's your niece." "She's your responsibility," he cut me off. I didn't tell you to have a kid you couldn't afford to take care of. That's on you." I was quiet for a long moment, looking at Emily sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Then I said something I'd never said to my family before. "You're right, Marcus. She is my responsibility, and so is everything that happens from here on out." "Good," he said. "Maybe now you'll stop bothering us and let us enjoy our wedding planning." But what Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was recording that conversation, and I was about to find out just how much their wedding choices would cost them. The day Emily died, October 30th, 2016, I was alone with her in that hospital room. The heart monitor went from its steady beeping to a long, flat tone that still haunts my dreams. She was 3 years old, 11 months, and 2 days. She'd never go to kindergarten, never lose her first tooth, never have her own wedding. All because my family chose flowers from Ecuador over her life. I held her little hand as it grew cold, and that's when I noticed something. Her hospital bracelet was still on her tiny wrist, a pink plastic band with her patient ID number, 47291. For some reason, I couldn't bring myself to let the nurses remove it. I asked if I could keep it. "Of course, Dr. Mitchell," the nurse said gently. "Take all the time you need." I slipped that bracelet off Emily's wrist and put it in my pocket. I had no idea at the time, but that little pink bracelet would become the symbol of everything I was about to do to get justice for my daughter. The funeral was 3 days later. 3 people came: myself, my ex-husband David, and Dr. Rodriguez. 3 people to mourn a little girl who should have lived to be 80. My parents didn't come. They said they were too busy with final wedding preparations and that funerals are so depressing. Marcus didn't come because he was getting fitted for his tuxedo. My extended family didn't come because, according to my mother, I was being too dramatic about the whole situation, and they didn't want to enable my victim mentality. So I buried my daughter with 3 people present, while my family prepared to celebrate with 300. The wedding happened exactly as planned, 1 week after Emily's funeral. I know because my mother posted about it constantly on Facebook, photos of the $45,000 orchids, videos of Marcus and Rebecca's first dance to their $35,000 symphony orchestra, pictures of Rebecca's $25,000 dress. The caption on one of my mother's posts read, "The perfect day for the perfect couple. So proud of our son Marcus and his beautiful bride Rebecca. Love always finds a way. Blessed best day ever, proud mama." I screenshotted every single post, every receipt, every bill, every photo showing exactly how they spent $250,000 on one day while my daughter died because they couldn't spare $95,000 for her life. But here's what they didn't know. I was no longer the same Helena who begged them for help. Emily's death had changed something fundamental in me. I took that little pink hospital bracelet, number 47291, and I made a promise. 8 years later, that bracelet would be the key to getting the justice Emily deserved. Because sometimes when your family chooses money over love, the only way to get their attention is to become the one thing they can't live without. And that's exactly what I did. 8 years. That's how long it took me to transform from the broken woman begging for her daughter's life to someone my family would desperately need. 8 years of 16-hour days, of studying every medical journal, of perfecting techniques that other surgeons said were impossible. 8 years of building the life Emily never got to live. After Emily's funeral, I threw myself into my residency with an obsession that worried my colleagues. While other residents went home to sleep, I stayed in the hospital practicing sutures on pig hearts until my hands moved with mechanical precision. While they socialized, I read research papers about innovative cardiac procedures for children. Emily's death had given me a singular focus. I would become the surgeon who could save the children that other doctors couldn't. Dr. Rodriguez, the surgeon who'd tried to save Emily, became my mentor. "Helena," he told me 6 months after Emily's death, "your dedication is admirable, but you need to process your grief." "I am processing it," I replied, not looking up from the medical journal I was reading about a new technique for hypoplastic left heart syndrome, Emily's condition. I'm making sure no other parent has to watch their child die because of money. And I meant it. Every surgery I assisted on, every technique I mastered, every innovation I developed was for Emily. I kept her hospital bracelet, number 47291, in my lab coat pocket every single day. During the most challenging surgeries, when other surgeons said a child was too sick to save, I'd touch that bracelet and remember why I was there. 3 years after Emily's death, I published my first research paper on a new surgical approach for complex congenital heart defects. The technique reduced surgery time by 40% and increased survival rates to 96%. The medical community took notice. 4 years after Emily's death, I was offered a position at Boston Children's Hospital as an attending physician, the youngest in their history. I accepted, but I negotiated something unprecedented: a pro bono program for families who couldn't afford life-saving cardiac surgery for their children. I called it the Emily Mitchell Foundation. 5 years after Emily's death, Time magazine featured me in their Rising Stars in Medicine issue. The headline read, "The Surgeon Who Never Loses Hope." If they only knew that my hope had died with my daughter, and what drove me now was something much more powerful: purpose. 6 years after Emily's death, I developed the Mitchell technique, a revolutionary procedure for the exact heart condition Emily had suffered from. The technique was so successful that hospitals worldwide were sending surgeons to Boston to learn from me. I was invited to speak at conferences, consult on impossible cases, and train the next generation of pediatric cardiac surgeons. 7 years after Emily's death, I was named head of pediatric cardiac surgery at Boston Children's Hospital. My salary was now in the 7 figures. I owned a penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, drove a Tesla, and had more money in my savings account than my parents had spent on Marcus's wedding. But more importantly, I had something they would soon desperately need. I was the only surgeon in North America who could perform the Mitchell technique. During all these years of building my career, my family reached out exactly 0 times. No congratulations when I published groundbreaking research. No acknowledgement when I was featured in national magazines. No pride when I became the youngest department head in the hospital's history. They had made their choice 8 years ago. Marcus and his perfect life were worth their attention. I was not. But I kept track of them. Social media made it easy. Marcus had gotten divorced from Rebecca 3 years after their $250,000 wedding. Apparently, she'd been having an affair with her yoga instructor. He'd bounced between jobs, never lasting more than 2 years anywhere. My parents had retired to their estate in Martha's Vineyard, living off my father's construction company investments and my mother's trust fund. Then, 8 years and 2 months after Emily's death, everything changed. It started with a phone call from Dr. Sarah Chen, my closest colleague and the only person who knew the full story of what my family had done to Emily. Sarah had been a resident when Emily was in the ICU, and she'd witnessed some of my most desperate moments begging my parents for help. "Helena," Sarah said, walking into my office on a Tuesday morning in December, "you're not going to believe who just called the hospital requesting a consultation." I looked up from the surgical notes I was reviewing. "Who?" "Your father, Robert Mitchell. He's been diagnosed with a rare aortic condition that requires immediate surgery. Apparently, every surgeon he's consulted has told him the same thing. The only person who can perform this particular procedure with any hope of success is you." I felt Emily's hospital bracelet in my pocket, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. What exactly is wrong with him? "Complex aortic root replacement with ascending aortic aneurysm repair," Sarah read from her notes. "The aneurysm is located in a position that makes traditional approaches extremely risky. 3 surgeons have refused to operate, saying the mortality rate would be over 60%. But with your Mitchell technique adaptation, the survival rate jumps to 95%. The irony was staggering. My father needed the surgical technique I'd developed to save children like Emily, children whose families couldn't afford traditional treatment options. "There's more," Sarah continued. "Your mother also needs surgery. She's developed a similar condition, likely genetic. They're both looking at a 6-month timeline without intervention." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. 8 years ago, they'd refused to spend $95,000 to save their granddaughter's life. Now, they needed me, the daughter they'd abandoned, to save theirs. What did you tell them? I asked. That I'd pass along their request for a consultation. Helena, I know this is complicated, but schedule the consultation, I said quietly. I want to look them in the eye. 2 days later, my parents walked into my office at Boston Children's Hospital for the first time in 8 years. My father looked older, grayer, but still carried himself with the same arrogance I remembered. My mother was impeccably dressed, as always, but I could see the fear in her eyes. They stopped short when they saw me. I was wearing my white coat with Dr. Helena Mitchell, MD, Chief of Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, embroidered on it. Emily's hospital bracelet was clearly visible on my wrist. I'd started wearing it there once I became successful enough that no one questioned my choices. Hello, Mom. Dad. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. Please, sit down. They sat, looking uncomfortable in the modern office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On my desk were photos from medical conferences, awards, and a framed copy of the Time magazine article. On my bookshelf were the medical journals containing my published research. The walls displayed my diplomas, certifications, and a photo of me shaking hands with the Surgeon General. Helena, my father started. Dr. Mitchell, I corrected. In this office, I'm Dr. Mitchell. He cleared his throat. Dr. Mitchell, we've been told you're the only surgeon who can help us. We both need surgery, and every other doctor has said the risk is too high. I opened their medical files on my computer, studying their conditions with the same clinical detachment I used for all my patients. Your cases are complex, I agreed. The aortic aneurysms are positioned in a way that makes traditional surgery extremely dangerous. However, I developed a technique that could address your conditions with minimal risk. Thank God, my mother breathed. We knew you'd help us. We're family, after all. Family. That word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Tell me, I said, leaning back in my chair. Do you remember Emily? The color drained from both their faces. Of course we remember Emily, my mother said carefully. That was unfortunate. Unfortunate, I repeated. Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe watching your granddaughter die because her grandparents chose wedding flowers over her life. Now, Helena, my father started. Dr. Mitchell, I corrected again. And I think you mean now, Dr. Mitchell, the only person who can save our lives. The silence stretched between us. I could see them calculating, trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation. We made difficult choices back then, my mother finally said. But we're here now, asking for your help as family. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. I'm going to record this consultation for medical records, I said, which was true. I recorded all my consultations, but this recording would serve a different purpose later. As I was explaining, I continued, your conditions require a specialized technique. The surgery would take approximately 8 hours each, and the recovery would be several months. The cost, however, might be challenging for you. What kind of cost are we looking at? My father asked. I pretended to check my computer. For both surgeries, including hospital stays and post-operative care, we're looking at approximately $400,000 total. Your insurance will cover about 60% of that, leaving you responsible for roughly $160,000 out of pocket. I watched their faces carefully. $160,000, more than the $95,000 they'd refused to spend on Emily, but less than the $250,000 they'd spent on Marcus's wedding. That's a lot of money, my mother said weakly. Yes, I agreed. It's almost twice what you spent on Marcus's wedding, but considerably more than the $95,000 you refused to spend on Emily's surgery. My father's jaw tightened. Helena, that's not fair. This is different. You're right, I said. This is different. You're adults who've lived full lives. Emily was 3 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. I touched Emily's bracelet on my wrist. But you're also right that this isn't fair. It wasn't fair when Emily died alone because her grandparents valued a party over her life. We didn't know she would die, my mother protested. Actually, you did. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping for 8 years. I have the medical record showing Emily's 80% survival rate with surgery. I have the insurance documents showing the exact amount needed. And I have this. I pressed play on an audio file on my phone. My father's voice filled the room. Helena, you need to be realistic. Even if Emily survives this surgery, she'll have medical problems her whole life. She'll be a burden. My mother gasped. They'd forgotten I'd recorded that conversation. I also have every receipt from Marcus's wedding, I continued, pulling out printouts. $45,000 for flowers, $35,000 for music, $25,000 for a dress, all while my daughter died because you couldn't spare $95,000 to save her life. My father stood up. This is ridiculous. We came here for medical help, not to be lectured about ancient history. Ancient history? I stood up too, and for the first time in 8 years, I let them see my rage. My daughter's death is ancient history? The fact that you chose a party over her life is ancient history? We made the best decision we could at the time, my mother said, tears in her eyes. No, I said firmly. You made the decision that was best for Marcus, just like you always did. He was the golden child, and Emily and I were expendable. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. But here's what's interesting about ancient history. It has a way of repeating itself. 8 years ago, you had a choice between spending money to save a life or spending it on something frivolous. You chose the frivolous option. I turned back to face them. Now I have a choice. I can spend my time, my expertise, and my surgical skills to save your lives. Or I can choose to focus my energy on the children who actually need my help, children whose families would do anything to save them. The room went silent except for the sound of my mother's quiet crying. What are you saying? My father asked. I sat back down at my desk and closed their medical files on my computer. I'm saying that you taught me a very valuable lesson 8 years ago about family priorities. You taught me that some lives matter more than others. You taught me that money is more important than love. And you taught me that when someone is inconvenient, you simply walk away. I looked directly at them. So thank you for that education. I'm going to apply those lessons now. Helena, please. Dr. Mitchell, I corrected one final time. And I'm afraid I won't be able to take your case. I need to focus my time on patients whose families understand the value of a human life. My father's face turned red. You can't do this. We're your parents. And Emily was your granddaughter. I stood up and walked to the door, opening it. She was 3 years old and she died alone because you chose flowers over her life. Now you get to understand exactly how that feels. My mother was sobbing now. Please, we'll do anything. We'll pay whatever you ask. I paused at the door. 8 years ago, I would have done anything, paid whatever you asked to save Emily. You told me to be realistic. You told me she'd be a burden. You told me to figure it out myself. I touched Emily's bracelet again. So now I'm telling you the same thing. Be realistic. Figure it out yourselves. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that this was just the beginning. Because in 3 days, I would be giving the keynote speech at the International Conference on Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, and I had a story to tell that would change everything. The real justice for Emily was about to begin.